Dark City tells the story of John Murdock, played by Rufus Sewell, who wakes up naked in a bathtub with no memory of who he is. There's the body of a murdered woman on the floor, and a mysterious phone call tells him to get out quick because a group of very strange looking men in hats and trench coats are coming for him. He flees the scene just in time and has to follow the clues to figure out what's happened to him. Along the way, he discovers that he has a wife, played by Jennifer Connelly, and that he's beginning to show some kind of telekinetic powers. All the while, he's being hunted by the strangers and a detective, played by William Hurt. And the more answers he uncovers about his past, the more questions begin to arise, such as why everyone seems to be having trouble with their memories, who are the strangers, and what exactly are they doing to everyone while they are asleep, and why, in this timeless, maze-like city, does the sun never seem to rise. I was first introduced to this movie while I was studying film in university, and it was one of those ones that we were required to watch, and it was definitely one of the more memorable and entertaining films that we were required to watch during my time there, and I liked it so much, I bought it on DVD, and I think I may have watched it one more time in the last 10 years, so I haven't seen this film in a long time, but I was scrolling through Netflix one day last week looking for something to watch, and this just jumped out at me. I love coming across movies that I know I really like, but that I haven't seen and I haven't even really thought of much in a long time. So my memory of exactly what happens in the movie is not so great. So it's familiar and it's surprising all at the same time. So I watched it, I really enjoyed it, and now I'm talking about it. Dark City was directed by Alex Proyas, who has directed some good movies like The Crow and this. And actually, after watching this, I realized I haven't seen The Crow in a long time either, and I only ever watched it the once, so I watched it again. It's still pretty good. It's not amazing. It's good for that early 90s, like, dark. It fits in well with the kind of style of the Tim Burton Batman movies. It has some similar aesthetics. It's a lot darker, it's a lot more violent, but if you haven't seen The Crow, I would definitely recommend checking it out. This isn't a review for The Crow or anything. I'm going to stick with The Dark City, but I just think that The Crow is something, it has a cult following, but I still don't hear that much about it. It is definitely worth checking out. It's not amazing, but it is really good. Anyway, so Alex Proyas has two good movies, The Crow and this, and then he also directed I, Robot, which is a fun movie. It's not great. It's a good Will Smith movie. There's some interesting action, some interesting story ideas, like the murder mystery with robots thing. He directed Knowing with Nicolas Cage. Again, kind of a interesting premise, but not a movie that I remember very much about and don't really ever want to watch again. I haven't seen Proyas' first film. It's called Spirits of the Air, Gremlins of the Clouds, but it looks interesting. You're gonna burn in hell! Proyas also directed Gods of Egypt, but the less said about that, the better. So, what is it about this movie that makes it so good? Well, the performances are good, the mystery of what's going on is compelling, and it has some interesting concepts, but all that is only about half of what makes this good. The other half, and maybe even a bit more if I'm being honest, of what makes this such a rich experience is the visuals. And I don't mean the CGI, we'll talk about that in a bit. I'm talking about the immaculate cinematography and the way that every single frame of this film looks. It almost goes without saying that this film is a noir, and I would say that if Sin City didn't exist, this would probably be the furthest a film has ever pushed the noir aesthetic. I mean, it rides that line perfectly. It teeters on the edge of falling over into becoming a cartoon, but it never does. It's great. I love the way this movie is lit. It's full of shadows and darkness, but it keeps a rich contrast look that keeps it vibrant and not looking too dreary and unpleasant. Characters' faces are usually half hidden in shadow. The strangers are often seen emerging from the darkness. It's thematically appropriate because there's information being hidden and our characters are in the dark about everything that's going on, but it also works from a story's perspective because there are reasons given in the film about why it has to be so dark. I actually had to close my curtains while I was watching this because I honestly couldn't see anything. So if you're going to watch this, do yourself a favour and watch it in the dark. The lighting's great and the cinematography's great, but the set design, the city itself, has that old-fashioned but somehow timeless look, where it looks like it could be any time except the recent past. The director said that when he was designing the look of the city, he took pieces from American cities, European cities, and London, so that you don't really know where you are. And all of the locations were actually constructed for the film without using any location shooting at all, which is really impressive. It doesn't always look real, but it is really there. It is a real set. It's really there. It's not CGI, so it still looks great. And again, there is a good reason in the narrative to why everything looks a bit off. It all makes sense from a story point of view. So I mentioned the actors before, so let's talk about them. Rufus Sewell seemed like a strange choice to me when I first saw this film, because even all those years ago, I always associated him with villain roles. He always played bad guys a lot. He kind of played like a sneering shithead guy. He was in The Legend of Zorro, A Knight's Tale, The Illusionist, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, and of course, he plays Jasper in The Holiday.
I wish you could just accept knowing how confused I am about all this.
The greatest character ever. It's nice seeing him play more of a hero here, and I think he brings a lot to the role. I like right from the opening scene where we see how freaked out Murdock is by the surroundings he finds himself in, and when he's talking to himself, trying to figure out his own name, and then he like loses it a second, goes a bit crazy, and then he turns around and realizes there's a guy standing right there watching him, and he gets a little embarrassed. And I like his reaction to discovering his name.
What's your name, honey?
John.
It feels really genuine. He just discovers, yes, my name is John. Oh my God, I guessed it right. And it feels really genuine. It's a nice moment. He also gets a great save the cat moment where he knocks over a fishbowl by accident and then saves the fish and puts it in the bathtub. So immediately we're like, oh, yeah, I like this guy. He's a nice guy. He didn't let that fish die. That's nice of him. William Hurt plays the detective who is looking for Murdock, because it turns out that the murdered woman that he discovered when he woke up was just the latest in a series of murders committed by a serial killer that the police have been looking for. And it's possible that Murdock just doesn't remember that he is the killer. And honestly, for me, Hurt didn't have to do much in this movie. All he had to do was show up with his face and his voice, and he just fits right into this place. He has a face that looks like it was designed to be artistically emphasized by shadow. Now, I like William Hurt a lot. Ever since I saw him in the criminally underrated Mr. Brooks. And he does actually give a good performance here too. I especially love the moments where he begins to realize that there are important events in his past that he knows happened, but he can't really talk about them because he can't remember when they happened, and everything's very hazy. And as he delves deeper into this mystery with Murdock, he starts to ask the same questions that Murdock is asking about what's really going on under the surface of this city. He also gets a very cool introduction. He's sitting in his creepy apartment playing his accordion, and I really like the way he says the line,
"No one ever listens to me."
Tom Cruise loves to run in his movies. Tom Hanks likes to piss in his movies. Brad Pitt likes to shovel shit into his mouth in his movies. And Jennifer Connelly likes to stand on the end of piers. This shot appears in 3 movies, and that person right there is always Jennifer Connelly. Jennifer Connelly is fine in her role here. She's okay. She's a good actress, but she's not giving very much to do here. Her character works as a singer, so there are some nice scenes of her singing in a club that add a bit of personality to the world and make it feel more lived in, so I like those scenes. Richard O'Brien is in this movie, and he is perfect casting as the main villain. He is the most prominent of the strangers, and I love his performance here. I grew up watching O'Brien on The Crystal Maze, which is a fun game show, and he was the guy who hosted the show. And after watching this, I looked up The Crystal Maze on YouTube, and now I have the theme song stuck in my head. The Crystal Maze was so fucking good, and the theme song is epic. People might know O'Brien as Riff Raff from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but he also wrote the music, the book, and the lyrics for the original stage version, and he wrote the screenplay. So he's a very talented guy, and he has the perfect look for this character, and I love the voice that he uses.
Mr. Murdock, yes. Where is he?
At times he sounds like HAL 9000, but he always says yes.
Will to result in this one's death, yes? Failed to report in, yes? Another template of the subject's memories, yes?
Which reminds me of the guy in A Clockwork Orange.
Awake at last, yes? I met your mother on the way to work, yes?
That's 2 Kubrick movies in one performance. That's not bad. I love the look of the villains in this. The pale faces with the hats and the coats is an instantly iconic look, especially the shots when the 3 different sizes are standing together. I don't know why, but I love how all of their names are nouns. They all have names like Mr. Hand and Mr. Book, Mr. Sleep, Mr. Face, Mr. Shade. I just think that's so cool. Kiefer Sutherland is an actor that I usually like, but here I do think that he's a bit of a weak link. I like the look of his character with the haircut and the limp and the clothes, but the way he speaks grates on me after a while, and of all the characters, he's the one who probably delivers the most exposition. And I'll be honest, the exposition in this movie can be quite clunky at times, but it sounds even worse when it's said in that voice.
Maybe he's a step up the evolutionary ladder, a freak of nature. He's adapting to survive. What do you expect? Weren't you looking for the human soul?
Like, I don't like that. That's too much. I also find his character very confusing. When he's with Murdock, he wants to help him. He's trying to give him information. He's trying to help him defeat the strangers and save everyone in the city. But when he is helping the strangers, he seems to be enjoying himself way too much. Like, apparently he's being forced to help them, and there are flashbacks showing like what they did to him to get him to comply and everything. And it's all kind of horrific, but in the scenes where he's actually doing what they want him to do, using his expertise and injecting people and things like that, he has this smile on his face, and he's always like quipping and saying these lines and talking to these sleeping figures and making jokes and stuff, and it's like look a bit more miserable. Like, you're supposed to be, you know, unhappy. You look like you're having the time of your life. And that brings me to some of the other weaknesses of Dark City, because this is not a perfect movie or anything. The CGI, for the most part, is just not good. Sometimes it works okay, but it doesn't really hold up, even compared to other movies that came out around the same time. It's disappointing in the sense that it wasn't really needed. They could have easily changed things a little so they wouldn't actually have to use CGI, and it wouldn't have affected much. Also, because of how dark the city is, you think they could have masked the CGI, kind of how the T-Rex in Jurassic Park looks so good because it's nighttime and it's in the rain and it's all obscured. They probably could have been able to do something like that. There's a moment of god-awful ADR in this scene with this couple having dinner just before the strangers put them to sleep.
It's driving me crazy. I can't sleep. And they call my job unskilled.
You think you've got it tough? You try looking after these kids for a change.
And there are some moments of really jarring editing, especially right after Murdock's first encounter with strangers. They attack him and one of the strangers is killed, and then Murdock gets away. And then we boom shot down underground, and all the strangers are around discussing what just happened, like it happened hours ago. There's no passage of time being communicated. We see the scene, we boom down, and then they're talking about the scene like it happened hours ago. We needed another scene in between, or even a cut to black or a fade, anything to show that some time has passed, because that was just not communicated properly. And there's also a moment where Murdock throws a suitcase into the river, and the sound of the splash comes way too soon for how high he threw the suitcase. That being said, there are 2 moments of editing that for some reason I just love. This one where he sees the clothes and then he opens the door dressed, and then this one.
I didn't know he was still here.
John!
Hold it right there, mister.
It just gives the scene a sudden burst of energy. She says his name, he opens the door, there's the gun. I like how that scene flows. So I've said before that the exposition could have been delivered a lot better, and the exposition itself isn't a problem. This is a mystery story, and you have to reveal the answers at some point, but a lot of it comes from Kiefer Sutherland, and he tells it to the strangers. Now, these are a group of characters who already know this information, so why are they saying it to each other? Especially when every other character in the movie knows nothing about what's really going on, so they would be perfect vessels to deliver new information to the audience through them. I would have liked it if Connolly and Sewell had a bit more screen time together, so we got to feel a stronger romantic connection between them. There's also a leader of the Strangers called Mr. Book, who's played by the late, great Ian Richardson, and he's the one Murdock has the big confrontation with at the climax of the film. It should really have come down to Sewell and O'Brien facing off against each other at the end, because they have actually interacted with each other throughout the story, and O'Brien, earlier in the film, he undergoes a procedure where he has all of Sewell's memories put in his head. So he starts to feel as though he is Sewell's character because he has a lot of memories, and he starts talking about these memories like they really happened to him. It would have made more sense to lose the leader element and just have O'Brien slowly stand out from the crowd with a personal connection to Murdock. I think that would have worked a lot better. There's actually a lot about the final confrontation that I don't like. It's very big, it's very crazy, people are flying around. They're all pointing their heads at each other like it's Harry Potter, except instead of wands, they have foreheads. It's a little silly, and it's messy, and it's hard to follow what's happening, but I do really like this water explosion. We get a lot of fire explosions. It's nice to see something different. Okay, I don't want to spend too long talking about the negatives, because although there are a few, they don't really impact my enjoyment of the movie very much. But there's one more thing that I do want to mention that potentially could have made it bad. The opening titles of the movie are not good at all. If I had never seen Dark City and I was just coming in blind to this film, and one of the first things I see is these titles with this font, I would have been instantly turned off. There's just something so cheap about it, and it doesn't match the tone the movie's going for. It needed something a bit more gothic. I went on Google, I typed in gothic font and found like 100 examples of fonts that would have worked much better. It's a little thing maybe for other people, but for me, if I was, scrolling through TV, flicking through TV and came across this, I was like, oh, what's this? This opening clip is good. Oh no, this is like a cheap sci-fi channel original. I'm not watching that. As you watch this movie, you might start to get some very familiar vibes. Like it shares a lot of the same elements of a much more popular film you've seen before. And that film would be The Matrix. Dark City came out in 98. The Matrix came out in 99. The hero has special abilities that make him the most special one of all, and the only one who can defeat the guys dressed in black, who can change parts of the environment at will. There's a green tint in the titular Dark City and in The Matrix, and a blue tint underground where all the real shit is going on. As a matter of fact, the entire opening scene of the first Matrix film looks like a deleted scene from this film. It turns out that both films were actually shot at Fox Studios in Sydney, and they even used some of the same sets. The music also sounds similar. It even shares some characteristics with the Matrix sequels, like the sun rising at the very end to show the promise of a better tomorrow, and the fight between the hero and villain while hovering over the city. And Bruce Spence, who played the train man in Matrix Revolution, shows up as the taller of the Strangers. Also, David Wenham has a very brief non-speaking cameo as one of the Strangers too. Despite the similarities between Dark City and The Matrix, they still feel like very different movies, mostly because one is an action movie and the other really isn't. And that's probably a good indication why The Matrix made a lot more money than this one did. But you can see a lot of influences on display here, like The Third Man, Brazil, Metropolis, Blade Runner, and even a bit of Tim Burton's Batman movies. In fact, Christopher Nolan even said that this film was one of his inspirations when he was writing the script for Inception, which is one of my absolute favourite movies of all time. And you can kind of see it in the way that the buildings bend and change shape, and it shares some of the same themes. Some other things that I liked. I liked the detail about the shoelaces being untied. There's a scene in the beginning where Hurt tells a younger cop to tie his lace because it's untied, and then later the same cop tells Hurt to do the same. I like that because the Strangers probably miss some things when they're doing what they do to everybody while they're asleep. The line about how Connolly looks uncomfortable with her wedding ring, like she's not used to wearing it, but she says that she never takes it off. The scene with Sutherland knows exactly what kind of person Hurt is because he probably had prior knowledge of his memories. All those great little moments, they make this one of those movies that you have to watch again to get all of those little subtle hints at what's going on. I love everything about this location. And it's helped by the fact that Sutherland forgets to use that stupid voice and is actually giving a compelling performance. There's another lazy and unnatural bit of dialogue about why the strangers look the way they do, but I do really appreciate the vagueness of what the strangers really are. It's hinted at, but it's never actually said outright, which I really appreciate. And the same goes for not explaining exactly where the city is or where everybody else is from. I mean, you think you know. You know, you're guessing. You know, there's a place that they are probably from, but they don't say it. I like that. I like a bit more mystery. Lets you think. It makes it a bit more mysterious, a bit more interesting. Overall, guys, I had a really great time watching this movie. I've tried to remain vague about exactly what happens with the plot, but as I said before, the story is good, but it's the visuals, the lighting, and the set design that make this one stand out. I absolutely recommend Dark City, and I'm gonna give it an A. I couldn't help but think while I was watching this that Alex Proyas would have been a great choice to take over the Batman series in the 90s. I could easily see a Batman story taking place in a world like this. And as I was doing a bit of research for this review, I came across the Siskel and Ebert review for Dark City. And they seem to agree with me.
This is the direction Batman ought to be moving in.
Well,
frankly.
sure. Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's a dead series. You're right. Give him the next one.
There's an idea. Give Alex Proyas the next Batman movie and save the series.
In fact, Ebert actually went on to record a commentary track for this movie because he liked it so much, which I have yet to listen to, but I am very intrigued. Guys, thank you so much for watching this review. It has been a long time since I posted anything on this channel, but I saw Dark City and I was compelled to talk about it. I just really wanted to do it. But thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Look to the Movies, and I will see you next time.